much of like fully down, or I don't have it in the CAD, but completely just out of the way for the close shot. So I think I don't know. I may redesign the shooter to be redesign this top bit to be more efficient, just because at this point it kind of seems overkill to have all of this if we're only going to shoot fully up or fully down. But yeah, I don't know. We'll have to see with more testing. Unfortunately, when we tested the shooter, we didn't have all the code right, so that was just us running off of the hardware client and just manually setting a speed and letting it run. So we weren't able to test with the spindexer or with the indexer. But I think that with a consistent feed with the indexer, I think our shooter, even with one motor, is pretty good. So I would say we should definitely still add a second motor to be safe. But yeah, I think it's still pretty good for yesterday's testing. I think I do eventually, once we get hopper walls more in, I definitely want to get electronics off of the belly pan, because that was just a pain to work on. So I have a bit of a hopper. So this is what I had in mind. All of this would be just polycarb, either eighth or quarter inch. I don't think we'll need more than an eighth. Maybe some parts are a bit thicker, but it's just polycarb that's CNC'd, and some of it's bent to just use up as much space as we can. And yeah, so my plan was, instead of doing electronics down here, which is now even harder to reach, we'll just put electronics on this panel here, because you have lots of space to do it. And I think it shouldn't be a big problem. If we need to add some supports, we can add some supports. Shouldn't be too complicated. Yeah, but everything's coming along pretty well. I think we got, by the end, we got driving. And the good news is I don't think we'll need to change anything with the bumpers or in terms of like positioning height-wise, because we went over the bump and it was pretty seamless, surprisingly pretty seamless. Then again, there wasn't that, they didn't have the full amount of balls on the field, so that might change. But if you looked in the match video, we went over like 3-4 times, different orientations, and we seem pretty solid. So since it's working, I don't think I'm gonna touch the bumper height or anything. We'll just keep it working. And I think the main thing that we need to worry about with bumpers is reducing the gaps. So my plan is gonna be to do, for different sides of the robot, we'll do different bumper gaps. And I mean, like for this side, I think we want to keep it at the 1/2 inch because of this intake plate. Maybe we can probably go a little bit under, but I think I want to keep it pretty close to what we have, because even then it's still pretty tight. But like for these two sides, I think we can get away with a reduced gap, because there isn't anything on the outside of the drive rail. So and yeah, and this gap was really concerning if you look on the actual robot. So this is probably going to get reduced. But yeah, we had a pretty good day yesterday. We had a roller coaster, but it all worked out in the end. Yeah, that's what I have so far. I think our next step is really just like, as we get into spring break, let's cut some quote unquote final parts. So like if we feel good about the shooter, like I'll send it to someone maybe to pocket it and then cut it out of aluminum, and let's get that going. Once we redesign the intake, I think once we redesign the intake to match the bumper, it should be some pretty minor adjustments. Once we get that going, let's cut out a polycarb and then just call it. And if we need to make a change, we'll make a change. Same can be said about the spindexer. Like I think we're at the point where we're pretty happy with our systems. And I say like a little bit more testing, and I say we can just start cutting competition spec parts. I don't know if everyone else has any concerns about it, but I think we're pretty close, honestly.
What do we think about 22 inches?
I don't know. After looking at the week 0 matches, I was definitely considering it because it looked like a lot of teams got stuck on um on like the trench, not the trench, the bump. But from what we found, we went over pretty easily. And I think even if we have a bunch of balls, none of them would be on the bump itself. So as long as we don't completely full send it over the bump, which we really shouldn't, I don't think it should be a problem going back and forth over the bump over the course of the match. Um, but yeah, I mean, even if we wanted to do 22, I think we are actually not too far off. The only thing that we can just take the tops off of the hopper and then just repackage the shooter to be a bit lower. But I think right now going over the bump only is still okay. Not a problem yet. No, no, I mean, Levi,
So
you drove it, so if you
if
have
we
any
repackage the
comments, feel free
shooter,
to share.
I personally think going over the bump is best because, I mean, from what we saw, we go over really easily, and at that point, all you're doing is sacrificing ball storage for really no gain.
I agree.
so the week 0 matches are pretty useful to watch. You'll notice that a lot of teams do this maneuver where they force balls through the trench, and you'll notice that there's also a lot of autonomous happening that goes under the trench, collects balls, and brings them back. So that is a big thing that we're sacrificing by saying, "Oh, we're not going to be able to do that." Um,
Yeah.
the changes, I believe the climber is already under. The shooter could be potentially shortened. So it is very possible to make this change. The thing we would give up is the size of our hopper on how many balls we can hold. But it is something I don't think we should completely dismiss, especially if we're going to redo the shooter plates. Something we should really think about.
Yeah. Yeah, I think until we see, I mean, I want to see more matches before we like decide. I think League Zero is very telling, but I think a lot of those teams are still like full sending it. I think yeah, you are right in the fuel hoarding aspect of it. I think going under the trenches really like I've seen it both in like the simulator that people have posted and just in match pushing. Like they do the thing where they push the balls all the way to the side and then just drive forward, and they get like most of the balls into their territory. So it's something we should consider. But I think with the way that we have our hopper and everything set up, I think it's better if we just go over the trench right now until we see a good reason to decide otherwise.
It's fine by me. I think these hopper panels look a little bit crazy, so maybe don't make it too like they don't need to be that rigid, right? You have these huge brackets that
Yeah,
are supporting
these
them.
yeah, Carl pointed this out. This will probably just turn into like one by one, like good old one by one angle with a couple screws, and it'll be plenty.
Okay.
Yeah.
Have you thought about how the balls are going to slope in? Because I noticed we do have some spots where the balls just kind of get stuck.
Yeah. Part of that were these angled plates. But I think Carl also posted some pictures of like stuff we could do. I think it's just gonna take time for me to really slowly cat out like exactly how we want the curve to look, and how we can make it and all that stuff. I think 3D printing is probably a good place to start. If anything, we may use the Spindex or churros here. They can be good mounting points. You know, just add a quarter-inch hole and we can mount them to a couple spots to make slopes. But yeah, I think this corner is kind of a concern. I think yeah, the biggest ones are going to be like getting balls from here to go inward from the extreme edges of the intake in this corner over here. But yeah, I think it's very possible. There's a lot of things that we could do. It's just we're just gonna need a prototype and test it a bunch until we're happy. And I think eventually, I think I want to get to a point where we have like bent polycarb, because I think that's going to be the best long term. But short term, I think 3D printed stuff that just mounts to existing screw holes is going to be easiest right now.
It would be nice if the spindexer and the little brackets to keep things moving. So like if we need to work on the PDH, I'm not convinced we need to move the PDH right now, but let's say we do need to work on it. Spindexer needs to come out. We still need to think about like how do we get to different parts of the robot. And if you have these angle pieces that are just attached to the spindexer and the whole thing just comes out, makes it a lot easier. What do we think about making the panels on the bumpers? At least that panel opposite of the intake.
I don't know. I think it's gonna add. It's just gonna complicate things a lot. Because like I've been thinking about it a lot, but like from what I've seen, if we wanted to do panels on the intake, we would just or panels on the bumpers, it would just make things complicated, and I don't think we're gonna actually gain a lot from it. Like we're only gaining a couple inches, like an inch and a half ish maybe, plus however tall, and I just don't think that's gonna make a huge difference. It's not gonna make a huge difference in terms of how much we can hold, but I think it's gonna make a pretty big difference in like how serviceable our robot is and just how annoying it'll be to deal with bumpers and stuff, because it's just more stuff that we really shouldn't have to worry about being on bumpers. So I right now I rather like not, just because I think it's kind of an annoyance without any major gain. So yeah, that was my thoughts on it.
I did notice yesterday at Paradox there was a team who used just the front half of their bumper and they had it connected to their bumpers, and then they used that as a wall, and then it made it a lot easier for an extendable hopper. So if we go that route, walls on the bumper would help a lot, because then you don't have to worry about having double walls on the inside, and you can just connect your walls to your intake.
Yeah.
I'm fine either way. Just wanted to throw it out there, something we can consider. Yeah, I think we're in good shape. What are we planning to do tomorrow at Lamar?
I think a good idea maybe to obviously make the change on the intake. I might try to get by tonight. My hope is to redesign the bumpers to just have better gaps and gaps that make more sense, and then whatever that may be, whether that means we cut brand new planks or just trim the ones that we currently have for Lamar, that we can start that process, and then and then after I redesign bumpers, I'll redesign the intake geometry a bit, because I think the gap here will be different, and so I need to adjust some things. And then they should be able to just cut this plate. I don't think they shouldn't need to cut either of these two plates. The linkages should stay the same, and then they can just cut this. I think programming wise, we should also, now that we're considering of I think we're just gonna do two motors to make this simple. We should set that up, and then I think we should have all the hardware to put everything together. So we should just need to. That is probably something you guys could do tomorrow at Lamar. Just like, let's put the whole intake together in its full form, and just like make sure it pivots and stuff like that. I'm even fine right now if you just want to test code, like let's disconnect the linkage from the rest of it. Let's just pivot this top linkage and see if that reacts to the code how we expect it so that we don't damage things. But yeah, I think the code could use some work. I know Misha, you probably know more. I don't know what it was yesterday, but we had like the indexer and the shooter running at the same time all the time, which isn't ideal. I think we want the shooter running first until it gets up to speed, and then the spindexer to go. But yeah, that's probably something you guys can work on. Um, yeah, and then I guess you could realistically do this hood actuation. It's just not really a priority right now. So there's lots of things to do. Um, yeah, and it's just like if we want to clean up some wires, let's figure out what's wrong with the Spark Maxes because we did go through like 3 or 4 of them yesterday, which is concerning. But
I
yeah,
think Les managed to fix those Spark Maxes from yesterday. They just
okay,
somehow got locked, so they should be fully working now. I
okay,
think we tested them today. Not sure. We'll take a look at them tomorrow. And then also for the shooter, we had code where the flywheel spins up first and then the indexer goes. That was working originally. I think it was just because of the Spark Max issues that something went wrong. I mean, I'm gonna take a look at that tomorrow as well.
Code is probably the big thing that Lamar needs to work on, is just getting this robot to run reliably so we can test all the systems. Cedric, if you give them bumper changes, I think you might have to change the striker positions as well on the climber side.
yeah,
So I'm a fan of maybe making things a bit wider, just making that whole opening bigger. I just don't know if you can fit it all in. I guess technically in the bumper rules, if we had a plate that sticks out, I think that's still legal, but then we would like risk getting that plate smashed by stuff.
yeah. I mean, I think I have lots of room to just make this a lot tinier. I just don't know how the sacrifices in terms of strength, but if you look at this plate, there's lots of room to just like condense it all and possibly just make it a lot easier to attach to. If that makes sense.
Would it be
Yeah.
possible to make something that goes above the motor bracket? So we just move the striker over like 2 holes
To
like
make
a
to put
hole
it over
action
here.
system. Yeah.
Um, I guess it's possible. I don't know if we would want to do that, just because if we ever have to service our modules, then that's. I guess it shouldn't really matter. I guess we could do that. I would just we would this the assembly process for this just may be a bit complicated if we want to keep the same height and everything.
Yeah, I mean, if we need to, we just use the same bolts that fasten the drive modules to also fasten the striker. And then if you
Yeah,
need to make some sort of little shim plate to make it all even, I think that might be your best bet to widen the gap without really making too many big changes.
yeah, yeah. Because I think I'm basically at the limit for both sides. Yeah, this can't really move much. So yeah, I'll have a look at the picture and see how much we actually have to adjust. I think we could theoretically also move the climber a bit, right? We can move it to the away from the intake by like a hole, even like a hole or two, and maybe a lot closer.
I don't think it's centered right now. I think where the hook happens, I guess it depends on what we considered centered, but the hook itself looks like it's a little off center.
Yeah,
In a way, it's like how we lift with the robot. That's might be more centered, but keep in mind we never really built that bracing system either to make it more rigid. to the rest of the frame. So you guys did some climbing. Something we need to think about.
Yeah.
It's probably a good time to decide, are we sticking with Les's climber design, or are we open to investigating Cedric's original design, which had a pretty good bracing setup and cradled the battery?
Yeah. I'm just worried about this design just because of like how untested it is compared to a climber in a box. That was my main concern. And also just like the one hook setup supported on one side, it's definitely scary to look at. I mean, it worked fine because we are 80. We were only like 86 pounds, so we were actually really light. But yeah, it was still just, I don't know how well it's gonna do in the long run. Is my main concern.
Cedric, would you be able to show that climber design easily?
The double climb.
Yeah.
Okay, here.
And then you could go into detail about the bracing that we set up.
Yeah. So I think we cut one of these plates, but we would have a 2x1 running across. Let me move this. You have a 2x1 going across the whole frame, and then we have just one motor with a shaft that goes through both setups, and then these two would actuate together, and then we have a plate here that actually makes the climb, and we can think of some sort of material to add lots of friction to make sure we don't slip.
So this climber is actually tied into 3 of the drive rails as opposed to just one.
If anything, we might need to just like redo some of this because this was quite an old design, but that's minor detail at the moment compared to the overall picture.
Yeah, what is the overall picture? So we got to get the intake working, and we got to get the robot in like a steady stream of collecting balls, shooting balls. I think that's higher priority right now than reworking the climber. Now, if all that's working and we're really concerned about the climber, it might be worth going back and reworking the climber. But I think we got some major intake / just like picking up balls and shooting balls that we gotta get working really quickly here, because that's going to be the core of how our robot functions.
I think it's kind of a sticking point because the hopper designs kind of change a little bit based on that climbing mechanism. Where the electronics are also change based on that. So I'm sure he can, fine tune the details, but it would be nice if at some point we can tack down some of these.
Yeah, it's a tricky decision that we need to make. I'm hesitant to pour a lot of time into it because I just don't think we have that many people to rework all this, and we're about to go into a week of not really having access to all the tools that we're used to because of spring break. So it's going to cause us some slowdown. I'm also just generally concerned about the intake because we need to see it really picking up balls and not getting jammed. So that's a big test we need to do.